limbo, limbo, limbo.
That's it, that's the act. Yeah. So, good morning, good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
On behalf of Kennedy Center President Michael Kaiser, delighted very much to welcome you to this year's Curtain Up event here at the Eisenhower Theatre in the Kennedy Center. I'm Nigel Boone. I'm the Director of Artistic Planning for the National Symphony Orchestra at the other end of this extraordinary building. And about 3 years ago, I was sitting where these two gentlemen were sitting, and I was being interviewed by, at that time, Robert Pullen. And since then, it's been my pleasure to be sitting in this chair doing the interviewing. Can I just ask how many repeat offenders we have here? How many of you have been to these kind of events before? Oh, okay, so you all know the drill. That's great. Let me just put my glasses on so I can see what I'm going to ask you. Last year, we learnt about the Washington National Opera's Domingo K. Fritz Young Artist Program. And this year, we're going to take a look at the Kennedy Center's American College Theatre Festival. And our two guests today are, at the end, Gregg Henry, who's the co-manager and artistic director of the festival, and playwright Stephen Spotswood, sitting directly next to me, who's the recipient of both the Paula Vogel Playwriting Award and the Mark Twain Prize for Comic Playwriting for two different plays in 2 consecutive years. So you can see in the aisles we've got 2 microphones. What we're going to do is have a little conversation up here for 10 or 15 minutes. And then we're going to throw it open to you for questions from the audience. And if you're sitting close to the end of a row, please do come to the microphone, because that makes it very easy for everybody else to hear your question. If you're in the middle of a row, wave at us, we'll wave back. And you can then just ask the question from the row, and I'll repeat the question so that everybody else can hear. We'll start with Gregg. Gregg, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to be involved with this festival, this particular festival.
I first became involved with KCACTF as a student, as an undergraduate, and I was nominated for the Irene Ryan Acting Scholarship. And so that was in 1979, and when I began teaching, the mid-'80s, I wanted to get back involved. I wanted to get on the road, I wanted to see the productions, and I wanted to sort of help the organization in any way I could. And it was a question of giving of my time, because we do our work on the backs of volunteers. There's a whole national committee of 50 plus and countless volunteers who go and see productions all around the country at colleges and universities, and I did that. And I think it was a question of me caring enough to give my time that I wound up climbing the ladder.
So the festival already existed?
Yes, we predate the Kennedy Center itself. It actually is the oldest education program in the Kennedy Center. And the first festival was held on the mall in a tent. And then we moved to Ford's Theater, 2 seasons in Ford's, and then we played here in this space. And then when the Terrace Theater was ready, we took over the Terrace as our home base of operations.
How do you select participants? It's actors, playwrights, directors as well, or?
It has expanded to all disciplines in the theater. I think probably our most famous headliner event is, let's call it the Irene Ryan Acting Scholarship and our work with actors. But we have, I think, as equally exciting and dynamic new play program, the Michael Kanan Playwriting Awards, but it's expanded to include every discipline. So any student in the theater can find a way to be recognized, and we can find a professional development experience for them.
And what's the process? How do you find your people? How do you find the people you bring here?
The most important aspect of our program, I believe, is that we throw open the window and let some fresh air in on university theater programs and their productions around the country. A school decides to participate with us by entering a production. And what that means is someone comes from the outside and gives them constructive collegial feedback. And it can get a little cloistered, it can get a little incestuous in college theater departments, and I think the White Tower, it's beneficial to all the students, and it's beneficial to the faculty if someone comes from the outside and gives feedback. It's not slash and burn criticism, it's two laborers in the same vineyard talking about process.
Right.
And I think that eventually helps the students. And then the students subsequently become eligible for all of our awards and scholarship and residency and fellowship programs.
And so you say, you talk about awards and scholarships. Is there any actual, I hate to use the word work, but let's use the word work involved here at the Kennedy Center for the people, for the recipients?
Yes.
Or do they continue doing what they do where they have been doing it?
They do the work back home, and then they all convene on a regional festival. We have 8 geographic regions around the country. And the regional festival is a gathering place. It's a cauldron of usually about 100 programs from around each region. And at those sites, all in January or February, in those sites, the awards start to sort themselves out. I hate to think of it as a contest or as a competition, but that's where we are identifying the really strong actors, directors, in some cases playwrights, because our short play program is kind of sifted and sorted on the regional level. Designers, stage managers, young dramaturgs, young theater critics. And then the outstanding students from each region come here to DC in April for the National Festival. And while here, they have master classes and workshops with leading artists in their area.
Do they create new work together while they're here, or individually, or?
We're able to explore that in some ways. There are collaboration projects between designers and directors. There have been projects between playwrights and directors. Once upon a time, the actors would actually work on the new play development that was happening. But the playwrights actually expressed an interest in having more experienced, more seasoned actors working on their work. And so we made the transition to taking advantage of the great acting talent here in Washington. And so a young playwright, a 22-year-old, can have actors like Holly Twyford or Rick Fauché or Michael Rosato or some of the really bright lights of the DC theater scene working on their play with them.
So it's not, is one of the great things about this that it's not just limited to the Kennedy Center, it expands throughout the whole community.
It does, indeed. It
Yeah.
did. And in the evenings, we send them out to see work in town. We send them to Arena, we send them to Woolly Mammoth, to Shakespeare Theater Company and other
Right.
theaters. So they really get, the actors who are working with them during the day, they get to see them on stage at night in other productions.
Yeah. Steve, in fact, when were you part of this KCACTF?
So I got my MFA in playwriting from Catholic University in DC, starting in 2005 and ending in 2009. I was part-time, working full-time, doing it. My first year there, Greg was one of my professors in, I guess you call it a new play development course. So there was no way I was going to get through that year without hearing a lot about KCACTF. If I hadn't have submitted something, I think Greg would have had my head. So the first time I won the Paula Vogel Award in 2007 for my play, The Aaronsville Woman, which meant that I got to go to the regional festival that year in New Paltz, and then the national festival here. And then in 2009, what was my senior thesis at Catholic, Morning Miranda, ended up winning the Mark Twain Prize for playwriting. And in between, I actually had, I think, 3 other plays that made it as far as the regionals. So from 2005 to 2009, I was a steady participant on some level.
How structured was it for you?
How structured?
Or were you given complete freedom? Were there any kind of structural
It was
directions you had to take?
structured exactly where it needed to be. At both the regional level and the national level, I got to work with a director and actors in staged readings of the work that I had being presented, which was very structured, and it was the exact kind of staged reading structure that I have found in theaters, every theater since then, where you have not nearly enough time to put together a reading of a play, but you still somehow manage to do it. so really, like for the regional level, it was 85% rehearsal and then 15% meeting all of the people from that region. And then the national level, it was much less a percentage of rehearsal, but then there were classes and workshops with established playwrights and dramaturgs, which were fantastic. Like to be able to sit and learn from somebody who has been, making a career of the theater for years or decades. And in the unstructured part, I got to like go around and meet playwrights and directors and actors from around the country,
Right.
who, though they were in some ways in the same spot I was, like they were mostly students, they came from widely different backgrounds, doing like a vastly different work. And I am still friends with so many of them. Thank God for Facebook, which I use as a Rolodex. And people that I met, 7 years ago now, I still am connected with. Just this past, like 2 months ago, I got an email from somebody I met at the 2007 Regional Festival asking if I would proofread an article that she was writing. And yeah, of course I will. And it's fantastic, like the network that you come away with.
Is that one of the great benefits of this whole thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think, yes. If it's not the top benefit, it's way up there. Just meeting people and making connections, and then coming away. And if you do not foster the connections, if you do not foster the friendships, they'll go away.
Of course.
It's up to you.
It's up to you. Of course,
But
it's your
if you
fault.
do it,
Yeah.
then you get to, you have this core of other playwrights and directors and dramaturgs who are progressing along their career at the same time you are, and you get to confer and see where everyone is, and you get to learn from each other's mistakes a lot.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the other benefits of your involvement in this festival?
Some of the other benefits, there's name recognition. Getting work out here. I mean, it is. You can put that on a resume that you had something at KCACTF, and because it has been around since before this building existed, people know what it is. Like theaters across the country know what it is.
Tell us a little bit about, you're still in DC, you're based in DC. Tell us about your connection to DC and what you're up to here.
Yeah, I'm in DC for the duration. I have a house, I have a mortgage. I'm not leaving anytime soon. It's fun. It seems like every year my roots go deeper. I am now teaching. I teach playwriting. This past fall, I taught playwriting at Catholic University. I was teaching the grad classes that 5 years earlier I was taking. I had a student in my first year playwriting class who had 2 plays get to ACTF, and one of them he actually wrote while in the class, and that was both bizarre and fantastic. Yeah. I'm also, I dramaturg with Theater J, which I've been doing for 5 or 6 years now. I'm an artist ensemble with Forum Theater, and I've got a project going up with them next season. An ensemble member with Pinky Swear Productions, and I'll have a play going up with them next year. And yeah.
So you're busy, very busy.
I try to stay busy, yeah.
You talked about when Greg was your professor. Greg, when you were his professor, what was it that stood out particularly with Steve?
Well, Steven is, he's a man of the theater, which might seem like, well, of course he is. But very often playwrights are just biding their time waiting for a TV script to be sold, or to write something kitchen sink that could appear either on stage or on screen. And Steven is very theatrical. He understands the magic and the mechanics of this. And he always applies that to everything he writes. There's always a sense of, I think, theatrical mystery and theatrical magic, whether it be through sort of mythical or legendary or pop cultural or whatever, but it's theatrical. And that's always been sort of a through line in his work. I'm never bored by Steven's work. And it can be easy. I want to be diplomatic here, it can be easy to be bored by writers' work, that they're rehashing the same material, the same road. But what I'm impressed most about Steven is that he is the most proactive writer that I think we have in this community. He's not content to sit around whining about not being produced. He's very prolific, and so I'm always shocked to hear, well, Pinky Swear is doing this, he's developing this with Forum, he's doing this, and he has fringe productions, as opposed to someone whimpering of this one script that no one seems to love. Steven just writes and gets himself produced. Now, that's exciting. That's exciting. And I think the fact that he's staked his claim, made his home in this community, an artist in Washington, I mean, I'm not saying it's noble, but this community needs him. And he's making a stand. And I like the fact that a while back, we were in on that in some way. Our organization doesn't do the heavy lifting. They start with a gift as an artist. They have great mentors along the way, teachers that help. But our function, our role, is to kind of lay opportunities in front of them that'll help get them the next step or two. And so I'm just kind of proud when I keep reading in the paper of a new production or on Facebook or whatever mode of all that Steven's come up with and continues to come up with. And he rattles a lot of cages, which is always good for an artist.
Always good. Let's have some questions from the audience. Would anybody like to ask a question? Not all at once. Yes, ma'am.
Where did you learn to write before you came to Catholic?
The question was, where did Steve learn to write before he came to Catholic?
I've been writing in some form or another, since I was I think 6. I wrote my first short story. But I did my undergrad at Washington College, which is on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. It's in Chestertown, Maryland. They have a fantastic creative writing program there. And then between then and when I started my MFA, I was, and still am, a reporter. I was a reporter for the weekly newspaper in Kent County, Maryland, and then I've been a freelance reporter for many publications since then.
Does that deadline writing train you and help you? Is that a deliberate?
Yeah.
That's intentional?
Yeah.
Yes.
No. It is intentional. I mean, deadlines. I can't fathom missing a deadline, even with playwriting. I can't fathom it. But I think between the creative writing background in my undergrad and all the skill set I learned of listening to people and just hearing how people talk and learning about small town politics and all the wonderful, wonderful things that happen there have greatly informed my playwriting now.
Lady going to the microphone, thank you.
Hello. I'm curious. I recently retired, and I always wanted to work perhaps in theater, either as a playwright or in some other method of getting access to doing some work. I'm just not sure the best way to start. And I do have some background in writing. The job that I retired from, I had to do a lot of technical writing and things that got published in the Federal Register, but it was mainly government stuff. So I have some understanding of writing, and I do have some background with theater from when I was an undergraduate, but that was a long time ago. If you have any suggestions or ideas, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll take a couple. For basic writing and learning to write, nothing beats writing with a group of other playwrights and reading each other's work and critiquing it. If you have friends you trust, invite them over for a regular lunch or tea or brunch and just read 10 pages at a time. If you want something more structured, there are a number of classes in and around DC. I know the Writer Center in Bethesda has a bunch. And I know a lot of people who are transitioning to playwriting or like experimenting with it as a second career who have started there. As for getting involved in theater, I found that most people that work at theaters, including as artistic directors, are very open and very accessible. And I would say, no, like whatever theater that you like whose work you appreciate and enjoy and are like, I would like to write something like they just produced. You can volunteer there, ask the artistic director for coffee to chat, or if they have a literary manager, they'd also be a good person. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with just walking up and saying, I would like to be more involved.
That's very true. It's true from our side as well, because we think the same about composers and on our side of the building, composers and young artists. I like to be approached. We like to be approached by people. Before I was in this business, on the other side, I would always think, well, how can I possibly approach them? But actually, you just do. And if you do, they're not going to bite your head off. And you're absolutely right.
Another thought is there's an organization called the Theater Lab, and all of the faculty are working artists. So they're not, so to speak, professional teachers. They're actors on the DC stage. They're playwrights in DC. They're Shakespearean practitioners. They're movement artists. And so it's all taught by working professionals. And so it's designed for people who are exploring something beyond their regular day-to-day. And their classes are in the evening, and Renee Calarco teaches, I know, a playwriting class, and she's a terrific writer. And I would look into that as well. They work downtown out of I'm going to blank, the big Methodist church down in Gallery Place. Oh, sorry.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Okay, we'll speak closer to the microphones. Yes, they are working. I can hear the feedback. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I'm just interested. You're a playwright. Have you ever had the opportunity to take a book and make it into a screenplay? Are you interested in that?
The question is whether Steve has, as a playwright, has he ever taken a book and turned it into a screenplay, or has he been asked to do that?
I have not had the opportunity yet. Like Greg said, I really love writing for live theater and the stage. So I think it would have to be a special book and a special opportunity for me to do that. Yeah.
We are, however, and we have had multiple conversations with him, and there'll be another one coming up of Stephen adapting something for theater for young audiences here at the Kennedy Center. So a book for young people to play on one of the stages here.
So,
I noticed you have a 10-minute play award and a short play as well as full length. I was wondering for both of you whether you find that some playwrights that are better at one form than the other, just the way some people are better short story writers.
You take that.
what are you best at?
I don't know. I don't write a lot of 10-minute plays. However, when I'm teaching playwriting, I always start my students off with 10-minute plays. And it's not because they're the easiest. I always tell them that the difference between a 10-minute play and a full-length play is about an hour and 40 minutes.
Exactly.
Because a 10-minute play is just like a full length. It needs a beginning, it needs a middle, it needs an end, it needs tension, it needs conflict, and you have to fit it into between 8 and 12 pages. So it's very difficult. Which is why I probably don't write a lot of them.
A good short play isn't easier because it's shorter, because for a successful 10-minute or a successful one-act, being able to explore effectively the things Steve just described, that's a real skill. We do find that very young writers excel, they find themselves excelling with a 10-minute play or a one-act, and it lights the fire to pursue full-length work more aggressively. And that it's a gateway drug, so to speak, to a full-length work.
time for one more question. You're both sitting next to each other. You can argue about who asked the question. Did you all get the question? The question was about charging for time, the value that Steve places on his time, particularly in conjunction with the example he gave of proofreading his friend's article.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's one that I and other professionals in this around have had extensively. In this case, I make a rule if it is playwriting or dramaturgy related, I get paid. It might be a pittance, and it's theater, so it usually is. But I do, and I also make sure that I have self-produced a number of works, and I would, even if they're friends, even if they're really good friends that are acting in this or directing this for me, I always pay them. As for things like proofreading articles, it didn't take me that long. And I've asked friends for the same thing, so I did not charge. I think it's personal. Like when art and money, man, you got to make a decision, and it's one that can change. Like your barriers can change over time. Mine certainly have. I used to do tons of playwriting, like 10-minute festivals, 24-hour play festivals, for free, and I can't anymore just because remember mortgage. And also just, I have more opportunities now, and yeah. So.
Great. Well, I think we'll continue the conversation on stage. Those of you who've been here before know that we now exit through that exit. We can go in just a couple of minutes, we can go into the green room of the Eisenhower Theatre that isn't, of course, green, and has posters, I think, of every single show that's been in the Eisenhower since it was built. You'll see some colleagues from the Kennedy Center on stage, including Mickey Berra. He's vice president of the Kennedy Center's production department, so he can tell you all the weights and measures and statistics and numbers and dates and all kinds of things that you would, I'm sure, like to ask him, but you can continue your conversation with us. In closing, I'd just like to say how happy we are to have you with us again. Thank you very much for coming. It's great for us to be able to talk about the kind of work that we do here in the building, but that work's only really made possible through the generosity of people like you, our members and donors. And you've heard me, this is my litany every time, you've heard me say this before, but it's often assumed that the Kennedy Center is a government building and a government organization that receives a lot of government funding, and in fact that's not true. The funding that we receive from the federal government actually only covers our expenses as a presidential memorial, as a facility. So utilities and security and repairs and things like that. All of the programming that appears here on stage is paid for solely by ticket sales, and that covers a little less than a half, and by contributions from members and donors like you. So thank you for what you do, because what you do helps us do what we do. Thanks very much. Please go through there. Thank you.